In this film we'll be looking at just one book, the Service of Registers. Every time there's a service in church, the priest enters into a book the details of the service. It acts a bit like a church diary. Well, this is the book that we're using here in 2017, but this is the book from the period of the Great War. And as you can see, it's rather damaged, water damaged, and some mould on it. So we have to look after this book very carefully. On each page, the priest fills in the details of the day and its services, date, time, what type of service, the priest's name, number of people who received Holy Communion, the name of the preacher, sometimes another note, and the amount of money collected for the poor, called alms. This register starts in April 1913, but let's turn on to the next year, 1914, the year the First World War started. Britain declared war against Germany on the 28th of July 1914. With such a huge global event of colossal historical importance, what would you expect to find on a day like that? Well, of course, at the time itself, people generally didn't know what a huge catastrophe was about to unfold. They knew that there were terrible political tensions, but surely it would all be over by Christmas. So on the 28th of July 1914, perhaps a bit surprisingly, we don't find anything in the register. All the priests were on holiday. It was the height of the summer. The vicar, Father James Goddard, had gone away on his holiday on the 19th of July and didn't return until the 6th of September. Here's a picture of Father Goddard taken around this time. The junior priests, the curates, Father Fletcher Lamplugh and Father Edward Cutler, were left in charge for the summer. For the first 4 weeks of the war, we find no mention of it in the registers, and perhaps it was that the news was taking time to be understood and people were taking their time to react to that news. Then on Saturday, the 21st of August, at 7 a.m, the Holy Eucharist is recorded, with 4 or 5 times as many people present as usual. We see this in the service register, and the words have been added for special war celebration. Father Cutler put the words war celebration in inverted commas. Of course, it was not a joyous celebration. It's just that every act of worship is called a celebration. At the Mass, there was a special collection of money for the Prince of Wales Fund, 9 shillings. The fund was for the medical care of war casualties. The reality of the outbreak of war was now starting to dawn on people. Soon after that, we see that the vicar returned from his holiday, and a couple of weeks later, Father Cutler left the parish and joined up as an officer of the Essex Regiment. He was 28 years old. Just less than 3 years later, he was killed in Arras, in France, fighting on the Western Front. It was Father Cutler who gave St. Bartholomew's the beautiful Russian icon, a memorial to his father, and as it turns out, to him as well. The war was not over by Christmas as people had hoped, and we can see here in January 1915 funds were being collected in church for the Red Cross, £2, 6 shillings and 4p. On the 30th of January, a Mass was offered for a G. Marshall on his departure to war. The war and the suffering was a challenge to people's faith. How could such terrible events be happening? For Lent 1915, the 40 days leading up to Easter, the vicar preached a series of sermons each Sunday entitled Wars of the Bible. As the fighting intensified, the casualty figures rose. Bereavement would have been a tragic and common experience. On All Souls' Day, the 2nd of November 1915, a day on which people pray for the dead, the Holy Eucharist of the day was offered for the fallen in war. When we consider all those entries in 1915 taken together, we see that the spiritual tone of what was happening in terms of worship was changing quite significantly. In 1916, the Holy Week Stations of the Cross were introduced, stations that speak very much of suffering and seeking to find meaning in suffering, even for children, as we see a special service on Good Friday for them. Pictures and stations of the cross for children is recorded here in the register. We explore these wartime stations in more detail in another of our films. Perhaps the most remarkable war-related entry in the register comes in November 1916. In bold red letters are the words, "The National Mission." This was a spiritual and moral campaign across the whole church, launched by the Archbishops of England and directed by the Bishop of London, Arthur Winnington Ingram. Here's a photograph of him. This picture was sent round to the parishes that were keeping the mission. The war had been underway for over 2 years by this point, and across the country public morale was low. People's faith was being tested, and many were losing hope. The war was not just a faraway horror. The first daylight bombing raids on London had started. The war, the archbishops said, was a mark of a failure of love, and there needed to be a revival of hope for what is better, so that the purpose of the war could be understood. The national mission was a time to repent for what was wrong and a time to inspire hope. Each church and chapel had its own mission. At St. Bartholomew's, it ran from the 25th to the 29th of November. And on the Sunday, there were 8 services with a guest preacher to spread the message. So here we see the entry for the national mission, which took place at St. Bartholomew's between the 25th and the 29th of November 1916. So here we can see on the 25th it starts with evensong at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then the full day of the mission itself, the Sunday next before Advent. There's almost a service on the hour and each hour during the day. 7 a.m. Holy Eucharist, 8 a.m. Holy Eucharist, and then we see at the 8 a.m. Eucharist, 77 people have made their communion. 10:30 Matins, 11 o'clock Holy Communion Choral, which was probably the biggest service of the day. At 3 o'clock, because there is a service for children, but the national mission was for all ages, so children are included. And then at 4 o'clock, in capital letters, men's service, because the mission was partly about encouraging recruitment as well. 6 o'clock, evensong, and at 7:15, the mission service itself. So from 7 a.m. in the morning right through until the evening, services were happening. Money was being collected for the poor, and we see that the mission continued on the 29th of November as well. Again, there's Holy Eucharist and evensong in the evening at 8 o'clock on the feast of St. Andrew Apostle, and with special intercessions, with special prayers for the work of the mission. So we can see it's a very full series of services and events addressed to all types of people. The register ends in March 1917. Father Goddard left the parish that year, having been the vicar for 20 years. Father Lamplugh, the curate, also left the parish to join up as a private soldier. He joined the London Regiment of the Artists' Rifles for the duration of the war. Father Goddard was followed as vicar by Father Arthur Godolphin Pentreat, who was a senior chaplain in the army with the rank of lieutenant colonel, and who had served with the army in Dublin, Malta and Bermuda. So that concludes this look at the Register of Services. Sadly, the book that would have covered the period of the very end of the First World War is now missing. But what we've seen here is that the war had a terrific impact on people's lives, and that was changing their life of prayer and what they were reflecting on spiritually.
Please have a look at our other short films. They'll show you a glimpse of what else we've discovered. If you'd like to see for yourself, you're very welcome to visit us here at St. Bartholomew's Church.